Hello, everybody, and welcome to We'll Tell You What We're Reading, the monthly show where we, the staff at the Waltham Public Library, will tell you what we are currently reading. I'm Liz Rior. I'm the Collection Development Librarian here at the Waltham Public Library, taking over this program from Laura Bernheim, our head of reference, who has moved on to a new and exciting position. We miss her very much, and she is here in librarian spirit. Joining me are two of my amazing colleagues. We have Greg Carter and Louise Goldstein. And we have, in addition to this program, we have lots of great programs here at the library, both virtual and some in person now as well. You can find all that on our event calendar. Some upcoming book related programs we have are the book groups that we do here. Greg and Louise both each run one of our book groups. Louise actually runs two of them at the moment because she is very talented. So those upcoming programs we have on Monday, May 2nd at 7 o'clock virtual is going to be Tell Us What You're Reading, where you, our viewers, tell us what you are currently reading, and we have a nice discussion. Again, that's a virtual program. On Monday, May 9th, Greg's Science Fiction and Fantasy Book Club will be discussing To Say Nothing of the Dog by Connie Willis, and we do have copies of that available here at the library if anyone is interested in checking one out. On Saturday, May 14th at 10 a.m., the Saturday Morning Book Club will be discussing Intimacies by Katie Kitamura. And on Monday, May 23rd at 7 p.m., Louise will be leading the Initiating Inspiration Book Club. That will be virtual with Dusk, Night, Dawn by Anne Lamott. And on Wednesday, May 25th at 7 o'clock, the Wednesday Night Book Club, also run by Louise, will be discussing A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Room. And that is also a virtual club or virtual meeting. The Science Fiction and Fantasy Book Club will be in person. I don't think I mentioned that. So please like us on YouTube and follow us on our various social media channels to stay up to date with all of that. We are very fortunate to have a wonderful group of friends here at the Waltham Public Library who support us through programming and pay for this professional Zoom account. So please support them. They're always looking for members. It's a lovely way to give back to the library and help just increase the wonderful things we're able to do for our community. So let's see. Okay, we're gonna get started. I'm very excited. I got to see what books people were doing before we were talking about it, and they all look great. So I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague, Greg, and he's gonna give us some info.
Hello, everyone. So I guess let's get this show on the road. So bear with me one moment while I share my books. Here we go. And slideshow. All right. So the first book that I have to share is a novella by Cassandra Khaw called Nothing But Blackened Teeth. So, you know, really cheery stuff right here. The premise essentially is that a wedding party of friends, and I say that phrase very, very loosely, from Malaysia, is having like a pre-wedding party, and one of their friends who happens to have a ton of cash decides that they're going to rent out a mansion in Japan, like on the outskirts of like the mountains that has been around since for at least 800 years. And unsurprisingly, because this is a mansion that was built during like the Samurai Wars, this house has a little bit of baggage. Kind of legend kind of speaks that a long time ago, the bride-to-be whose family owned the house was waiting for her husband, and he unfortunately did not make it back home and died. And so in her despair, she walled herself alive into the house, and it became essentially her tomb. So Speaking of baggage, though, the wedding party definitely has their own demons to deal with. A lot of them really have just unaired grievances between one another, including the groom and bride. And while they're fighting and arguing and, not coming to terms with how they've hurt each other, they fail to recognize that the house is listening and the bride is very, very real and she's lonely and she wants company down in the ground. So that is where I'm going to leave it because I can't really give too much spoiling other things. But when it comes to like prose and ambiance, I really like this book. I think it does a really good job describing the sheer creepiness of this location and how the weight of ages and history has kind of like caused this place to be, I don't even know if I want to use the word haunted. It almost seems like it's infected with like just decay and grief and just sheer loneliness. And you're always just kind of, and the characters themselves also admit this too, that this is a place you shouldn't be. And there's a price to be paid for, trespassing on such ground. However, I can't say that it was my favorite book, namely because the characters are not, and I don't know if I'd even consider this a criticism, just more of like a personal taste, is that the characters are not especially likable. I mean, each of them, with the exception of the protagonist herself, each of the people that are being portrayed in this are not exactly lovely people. One's an absolute hypocrite. One's cruel simply because they can be. One is just totally oblivious to the needs of other folks. And even the main character, while she's not, I'd consider a bad person, she's not exactly somebody who I don't think you'd exactly want to hang around with by her own mission. And again, it's hard to be too critical of that because I feel like the book is doing something with that and is trying to present it. It's just, for me personally, horror is bred through empathy. And I feel like the more attached I am to the people, the more terrified I am. And this, unfortunately, didn't have that connection for me, but it is a very well written little spooky story. So not my favorite, but certainly a solid haunted house tale. So with all that said, you might be thinking to yourself, wow, Greg, that was a really dark story you read. I hope you read something to cheer you up and, something to, put a little skip in your step. And yeah, I decided that I needed to revisit an old classic and reread something. And that was The Indifferent Stars Above, the harrowing saga of the Donner Party. I don't know. I don't know why I'm like this. Yeah, I tried to read Pollyanna. It didn't work out. So I went to this. But for those of you who don't know, this is the Indifferent Stars Above is by Daniel James Brown. He wrote a nonfiction story pretty much recounting the crisis that the Donner Party went through. For those of you who don't know what the Donner Party was, I'm sorry that I have to ruin it because that sounds kind of pleasant. It's pretty much about, in the 1840s, about a group of settlers setting out from Independence, Missouri to California to be part of American expansion and the idea of manifest destiny, that it was America's supposed God-given right to go out and colonize the rest of the American frontier. So there were a lot of reasons they would do that. For starters, the East Coast, where we're living right now, was incredibly built back up. Land was really expensive. There were a lot of diseases that were coming out, and the idea of going out and expanding, finding a lot of land with a lot of space, a lot of potential resources, and limiting disease was very, very promising for a lot of folks. unfortunately, whether or not whether the fact that people were already living there to begin with, like indigenous folks and Mexican settlers for centuries, if not millennia, didn't really make too much of a difference for these American settlers, but which the story acknowledges. But in any case, they would go out from Independence, Missouri, and try to settle in like the Oregon, hence Oregon Trail, or California. Now, the thing that I did not realize when I was reading this book is that how harrowing of a journey that was. I mean, most of my generation has played the Oregon Trail, and oxen dying is always a pain, but it was so bad sometimes to cross what is now the United States, that it was safer to take a ship and sail around the continents and get to California. And most people tried to do that because they're just even in the safest paths, like the bodies of of people who did not make it littered it. And it was even worse for the Donner Party because they failed to listen to the warnings and signs that people were telling them. For example, going to California, there's this group called the Sierra Mountain Range. It's safe to go to during the summer, but once winter goes around, it becomes like a frigid wasteland. And the safest time to go there is before May 1st, because by the time you get there, anytime after May 1st, that's when it's just like a bleak, frozen desert that's akin to the worst New England snowstorm. So the Donner Party left around like 2 weeks after that, after May 1st, and they met experienced mountain men, indigenous people who lived in the area, survivors of folks who had tried that pass and not made it, and every single person said, turn back, you're not going to make it. And this book is pretty much the consequences of that, which includes freezing to death, murder, and cannibalism. So hey, it is a very dark book, but it is very fascinating. And if you want to read a story about tragic hubris, that's the one to do. I'm so sorry. I'm going to turn it over now to my wonderful colleague, Louise, and she's going to share hopefully some lighter-hearted stories. Thank you.
Wow, those are so interesting. Thank you, Greg. Wow. Yeah, maybe not the most uplifting titles, but interesting. Okay, so this title, I wouldn't say it's totally uplifting either, sorry, but the language is mwah. The language is, and in fact, I want to just read you a tiny bit from the book because this author, Mbola Mbue, this book was a finalist for the Penn Faulkner Award, and it was a New York Times 10 best books of 2021 list book, and it's such a lovely book. I really recommend this book. Okay, so the interesting thing, the author has almost like a Greek chorus of, quote, the children in the novel talking. So it's like a first person plural group, and they talk throughout the book. And then she has first person singular individuals telling their parts of a particular story. It's a very interesting construct and it works really well. So here are the children talking. We should have known the end was near. How could we not have known? When the sky began to pour acid and rivers began to turn green, we should have known our land would soon be dead. Then again, how could we have known when they didn't want us to know? When we began to wobble and stagger, tumbling and snapping like feeble little branches, they told us it would soon be over, that we would all be well in no time. They asked us to come to village meetings to talk about it. They told us we had to trust them. So who are they? They are an oil company called Hexton in a fictional town in Africa that the author calls Kosawa. And this book is happening between the 1980s and the 2000s. It focuses on one family in particular, the family of Thula Nangi, And the children are her contemporaries who grow up at the same time as her. And Pexton, this oil company, has come in, they've found oil, they're digging for oil, they've polluted the rivers, children are getting sick, people are dying from what they've done to the land. And the people of Kosawa have lived there, it seems, forever, and they have a very strong community, and they have sort of a deity that they call the spirit, who they believe lives through them, and they live in a very simple, kind of beautiful way, and this oil company is getting in their way. And they go to these meetings, and the Pexton people make all these empty promises, but really they're just polluting the land. And in the meantime, it's a dictatorship that runs this country. And there's not really a lot the villagers can do. And of course, people have feelings, and Thula's father, Malabo, goes to see the oil people to sort of protest what's happening. The only problem is he never comes back. He never comes back. And so now Thula is without a father, and her mother's without a husband, and his brother Bongo kind of helps to take over the family, but there's a lot of suffering going on, and a lot of beauty in the old ways. And there's kind of a cool quote, one other quote I wanted to read, where Thula is asking her father about America. And it says, "I asked Papa about America, if it has as many people as Kosawa. And he tells me that, from what he remembers in school, America has about 7,000 people, most of whom are tall men. The overseer at Gardens was from America. He and his friends came to Kosawa to get oil so that their other friends in America would have oil for their cars. Everyone in America has cars, Papa says, because the hours over there go by so fast that people need cars to get to places quickly and do everything before the sun goes down." So you can see the writing is quite beautiful and sweet. You know, this is when Thula's a child, but as she gets older and becomes more aware of things, she gets an opportunity to get some education in the United States, and she becomes kind of focused on ways to be an activist, ways to help her town, even though she has fallen in love with a journalist who had written about the situation in Kosawa. But despite her love for him, her love for her village is greater, and she goes back to try to help make things better. And I don't want to reveal too much about the story. I don't want to spoil it, but it's a really wonderful read. I can't recommend her enough. She has another book out, her earlier novel, called Behold the Dreamers, and I definitely plan to read it. Okay, talking about light reading, I'm continuing with the light reading theme here. This is a very classic graphic novel, Mouse. It's actually in two parts generally, and I planned to read both, but as many of you may already know, this novel was banned in Tennessee in January of this year because I guess they felt that it was too adult oriented, and that there was too much use of profane language. And Art Spiegelman, the author, said basically what they were saying is, why can't they teach a nicer Holocaust? It's kind of what they're saying in Tennessee. So since the book has been banned, of course, more and more people are reading it. And I was only able to get part 2, Mouse 2. So I read Mouse 2. I'm still on the waiting list for Mouse 1 because it's in such demand. What I want to say about it is that read it. It's really well done. It's one thing Art Spiegelman says in an interview is that, in a way, even it's definitely about the Holocaust, but it's also about a father and a son understanding each other, able to sit with each other without quarreling. Because his dad, who went through so much in the Holocaust, so many traumatizing things, was a difficult man to live with, to grow up with. You know, he went through so much in his life. And by the way, this was a Pulitzer Prize winning book in 1992. It's very sad what happens. It's very interesting, the use of the mice as the people, and even showing sometimes the artist drawing the picture with like a mouse mask over his face, and then showing the Nazis as cats. It works very effectively. It's interesting too, because it's probably one of the first examples of a graphic novel of a, not a comic strip like a Marvel comic or an Archie comic, not that there's anything wrong with them, but this is an example of, graphic novel taking on more deep issues that many literary novels might take on, and doing it really well. I recommend this book highly. I know it's not a happy subject, but it's beautifully done, and it really is about a father and son coming to terms, trying to understand each other. And as many of us know, children of Holocaust survivors often, feel that trauma of what their parents went through, and it's a very difficult phenomenon. And so this is a way for Art Spiegelman and his dad to sort of come together. Beautiful book. Okay, and my last one, this is uplifting in some ways, but not totally uplifting, I'm sorry to say. This is a beautiful graphic novel. I have to confess, when I read it, I didn't know a lot about the author, Lane Milburn, and I just assumed that the author was a woman, and it's actually not a woman, it's a man. But this is a compliment to Lane Milburn, because the women in this novel are very strong characters, very well drawn. They're really the main characters of the book. Two women in particular are really the main characters in the book lore. One of them, Rachel, and then Joe, these two women, and then a man named Chris, they are artists, and they get to go to this planet called Lore, which is a more livable planet with ocean and good air and not suffering from climate change. And they get to go there to do an art installation. They're hired by a corporation. And as we know, on Earth, there's climate change and the difficulties of climate change. And the art installation, the pictures of the art are just magnificent. This is one of the pictures in the novel. This isn't actually the art installation, but it's just a picture of some landscape in the planet Lore. And you can see that this artist is just incredible. I wish I could show you all of the art in this book, but he is such a talented artist, and the characters are so well drawn. And it's about the characters and sort of who they are, but it's also about the corporation who's sponsoring them, and finding out some not so pretty things about the corporation. I don't want to spoil this book. It's a fast read. It's a beautiful read. I definitely want to read more by Lane Milburn. I recommend this book with 4 stars. Even though it's not totally happy, it's very beautiful, and there's a sort of a magic to it. So highly recommended. And now I will turn this over to my esteemed colleague, Liz.
Thank you, Louise. All right. I love that you did graphic novels, because today I will be only talking about graphic novels. So I hope folks are not sick of it. How could they be? All right. So the first book I'm going to talk about today is volume 1 of Ms. Marvel, No Normal. Earlier this month, I think it was, maybe last month, the Disney Plus series for Ms. Marvel had the trailer released. So I decided to revisit the first volume of the series it's based on. So that's by G. Willow Wilson. The TV show on Disney Plus is a 6-episode arc, and it premieres on June 8th, 2022. If you don't subscribe to Disney Plus, as we have said before in this program, the library does have subscriptions on Roku's that you can check out as long as you are that you can borrow. And I have one checked out myself, so I can watch Moon Knight, which I haven't started yet. But so Ms. Marvel is the story of Kamala Khan. She is an ordinary teenage girl in Jersey City. She loves hanging out with her friends. She loves superheroes because in this realm, superheroes are real. And in particular, she loves Captain Marvel, aka Carol Danvers. She is Muslim American, and she is from a pretty liberal family, but there are still some sort of more strict roles as to what's appropriate for her to do, what's not appropriate for her to do. But she loves her family, even though they stress her out. So if you are familiar with the Marvel series at all, you will be aware of this plot development called the Terrigen Mists, which basically awaken like superhero abilities in a small segment of the population. They're called Inhumans. They have inhuman heritage. And as it turns out, Kamala is one of those people with these latent superhero abilities that are awakened by these mists. So suddenly, not only is she balancing school, family, you know, her religious obligations, she now has superpowers and has to figure out, much like sort of Peter Parker, how to use them for good, but also keep the rest of her life together and not let anybody find out. I really love the series. G. Willow Wilson's a wonderful author. She's written a lot of young adult fiction as well. And I can't wait to see how Iman Vellani, who's cast to play Kamala Khan, does in the Disney Plus series. So very excited for that. This next book, another graphic novel, obviously, The Nice House on the Lake by James Tynion IV, illustrated by Alvaro Martinez Bueno. I just started reading this yesterday, so I'm only about 15 pages in, but I'm so hooked. It is centered around a young woman named Ryan. She's a 20-something artist living in New York City, and one night at a party, she meets this guy named Walter. And he's like a pretty normal dude, but he asks her this question: how do you think the world is going to end? The phone is now ringing in the background. I'm just gonna have to let it go. Sorry about that, everyone. It'll be fine. She meets this guy named Walter, and he asks her, how do you think the world is going to end? And she's like, wow, that's actually a really interesting question. Usually people are like, so what is your social media handle? Like, do you like going to this bar? And every time she meets up with Walter, they kind of talk about it. Flash forward a few years, she gets this invitation from Walter to come visit his mom's lake house in Wisconsin, I believe. And when there's lots of like mystery around it, like he gives her a code name, she doesn't know who else is coming. He says it's very exclusive. So she gets there, she meets the other, I think 11 people who are there. Walter shows up. It's a beautiful house, has everything they could possibly want. And the first night that they're there, the apocalypse happens to everybody else on Earth but them. And it is revealed that Walter is actually some sort of extraterrestrial or supernatural being. I don't know yet because I'm only 15 pages in, but I'm so hooked. It's so creepy and cool, and I don't want to live in this world, but I can't wait to see what happens next. So highly recommend this one. And my last title for today is Call Me Nathan by Catherine Castro and Quentin Zuiton. This is originally a French graphic novel. It's translated into English. And it is about Nathan, who is assigned female at birth and is raised as a girl, even though he is not. No one else really recognizes that Nathan is not a girl, and they call him by a girl name that his parents choose for him. And this book is really sort of about Nathan's journey from being a like preteen up through teenager, young adult. And you follow Nathan along as he goes through puberty and his body changes. And he's like, why am I developing breasts? Like, why am I getting my period? I'm a boy. This is so like uncomfortable and weird. It also talks a bit from the perspective of his parents and his younger brother and how they're experiencing Nathan as he, comes out about being a transgender man and goes through the transitioning process as far as he is able to, being underage. Transgender rights have been in the media a lot, so I thought this would be a good read just to sort of stay, not stay up to date, but just like get more perspectives. This is cataloged as a fiction book, but it is a fictionalized biography of a real young man in France. So it's sort of nonfiction. It's written by a cisgender author, I believe, but it is based on the life of a real person. So one thing I really liked about this just description I found online is, Call Me Nathan issues a moving call for understanding, a powerful denunciation of prejudice, and a celebration of everything it means to love. And love is really the best thing in the world. And this is really beautiful, beautiful graphic novel. So now we've reached the point of the program where we talk about any TV shows or movies we've recently seen. Greg or Louise, do you have anything you would like to talk about today?
I have a couple. They're not so new.
Mhm.
I've been using Canopy. Just for those of you who don't know, we have a streaming media platform that you can use for free that I really like. It's called Canopy, and all of the films I'm going to talk about I watched on Canopy. The first one, I liked this so much I watched it twice. This is upbeat. Guys, this is upbeat. It's called Honeymoon in Vegas, and you get to see a young Nicolas Cage and a young Sarah Jessica Parker and a middle-aged James Caan, and it's hilarious. The very beginning of the movie, Nicolas Cage is at New York Hospital and he's going to visit his sick mother. He says to the nurse, "How's my mother?" And she says, "Not so good." And he goes in to see the mother and she says, "Can you make me one promise just in case I die? Make me one promise before I die." And he goes, "Of course, anything, Mom." And she says, "Don't get married." "Mom, that's a little much to ask." And she's like, "No, don't get married." He goes, "Mom, and then she dies. And he's like, "All right, I won't get married. I won't get married." Meantime, he has a girlfriend, the young Sarah Jessica Parker, who is delightful and is a school teacher. And they're dating and they really like each other, but she's getting like to the point where she's like, "Look, we have to get married." And oh, in the meantime, he works as a private detective, and he is a detective who helps people find out if their spouses are cheating or not. And there are some very funny scenes with that. So he knows he's going to lose this relationship if he doesn't marry her. And so they're stuck in traffic, and he actually stops the car and he's like, it's raining. And he's like, "Okay, we'll go to Vegas. We'll get married. Let's do it." And so they go to Vegas. She's very happy. They're going to get married. James Caan sees Sarah Jessica Parker coming into the hotel with Nicolas Cage, and she looks just, now James Caan is playing a professional gambler, kind of seems like kind of a mob kind of a guy, and Sarah Jessica Parker looks just like his former wife, and so he is going to finagle and try to meet her, and the hijinks begin there. And I'm not going to say any more because I don't want to spoil it. It's hilarious. It's very fun. A lot of funny Elvis scenes, Elvis impersonator scenes, a lot. Fabulous, funny, great for these times if you want something light. The other thing I watched was a documentary also on Canopy called 112 Weddings. And this guy, Doug Block, was filming for people doing wedding videos, things like that. But his question in his mind is, how did these weddings work out? How did these marriages work out? And he had filmed 112 different weddings, and he does some follow-up with various couples and to see how things went. And it's just very interesting to see the different follow-ups. And then one other one is Forget Paris, also on Canopy, with Billy Crystal, who I adore. I adore him so much that I named my first cat after him. My first cat that I ever had was named Billy Crystal. He's a great cat. And it's very funny. And this couple meet in Paris. Billy Crystal plays like a basketball referee, a professional one, and Deborah Winger is a travel person. And how they meet is because Billy Crystal's father had died and his body was being flown to Paris, but they lost the body. They couldn't find the body of his dead father, so he's freaking out. And Deborah Winger is the one who has to try to help him, and then they end up dating, and then various mishigas occurs, and the whole story is being told about this couple at a dinner with Julie Kavner, who does the voice of Marge Simpson and who played Rhoda's sister on the show Rhoda way back in the day, and Joe Montagna and Cynthia Stevenson, who's the fiance of Joe Montagna, and they're telling this story. And it's very funny. It's like a lovely romantic comedy. If you're in the mood for a light romantic comedy, which I have been, totally recommend it. And that's all I have to say at this time.
Thank you, Louise. Greg, anything that you'd like to share with us today?
Unfortunately, I haven't really gotten any around to watching any things.
That is okay. I have one item I'm going to share. This is going to be to put on the to don't watch list.
Oh dear.
So I love large horror movie franchises, and I love forcing myself to watch all of them, and they do get progressively worse. So a few nights ago, I watched I think it's from 2006, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginnings, which is supposed to be about sort of the like dawn of Leatherface. And it is not good. You can watch it. I believe I saw it on Netflix, which we again have Roku's that you can check out to access that material. But it is not particularly well done. There is some pretty good gore, like I'll give them that. But it's just incredibly bland. Like when I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I want like extreme, scary, heart-pounding terror, and this to me was more the terror of like I can't even think, well, like opening a box of crackers that you just bought and realizing that there's like a bug trapped in it, this is kind of unpleasant, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So if you're going to watch any Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, stick to the original one. Also, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is amazing. But that's my brief to don't of the day. So thank you so much to Greg and Louise and to me for being here today. And thank you everybody for watching. Again, please like and subscribe to the library's channel so we upload material of various programs that we've done. And yeah, I think it's time for us to do the Zoom wave and then head off into the wild blue yonder. So bye everybody.